Hi guys, this is Marianne Esau for EDL 850, Module 13, Torts. So, a tort is an actionable or civil wrong committed by someone against someone else, and oftentimes a remedy must be obtained, and usually that is in the form of damages. There are two types of torts. One is intentional, which is a deliberate act against someone else, and one is unintentional, which is not deliberate, and it could be in the form of negligence. So my first case that I'm going to talk about is Frame versus Camo. And Frame was a student, and Camo was a substitute teacher. They were taking a spelling test, and several students became disruptive and were asked to leave, which they did. And then Frame became disruptive and was asked to leave, and he did not leave. Eventually, after being asked several times, Camo grabbed Frame, and Frame stumbled and hit the podium and fell against the blackboard. Camo eventually won the case because his actions were deemed justified, even though they weren't, in my opinion, right. A reactive measure as an administrator is I personally would not have that sub back in my building. It's never okay to lay hands on a student, and that sub should know better. The proactive measure is I would offer training for subs before they came into our building, just because a lot of subs don't have any experience working with students, and they might not know the rules and might not know that it's not okay to grab a kid. And a professional ethics would be that the sub should have asked for help. But again, I think that that could be the fact that they might not have known and might not have known what to do in a certain situation, and I think the training would help that. The second case I have is Flanagan versus Canton, and Flanagan was in a PE class, and the class was disruptive. The teacher let them out a little early because they had to lecture the students, and the students were really amped up, but the teacher had to keep one student back to talk to them one-on-one, which then the other students went to the locker room. And normally the teacher would go to the locker room to supervise and make sure that everyone was doing what they were supposed to do, but they didn't this day. And Flanagan got hurt and actually had to have an emergency splenectomy. And so, it was a pretty big injury. And the teacher said that they were gone for 3 or 4 minutes at most, but, something happened in that time. A reactive measure as an administrator, I would assign another staff member to assist, or at the very least ensure that the teacher felt comfortable with the students that they had and maybe knew that they shouldn't leave them. A proactive measure would be that I would remind all teachers to not leave their students unsupervised. So if something like that happened, they have to make sure that there's someone there to watch and make sure the students are acting appropriately. Professional ethics would be that the teacher should not have assumed that the students would just act the right way. They were really amped up from what had happened in class, and it was important that they were supervised the rest of the time. These kids were, I believe, late elementary or early middle school, and they just were out of control, and the teacher should have been more diligent about watching them. My next one is Mitchell versus Cedar Rapids Community School. And two special ed kids basically had a relationship. One was 14 and one was 19. And even though they had a big age difference, their cognition was similar, and so the staff didn't really see much of it at the time. A staff member did say that they thought that they were getting too close and maybe we're going to do something inappropriate, and eventually the students skipped school together and had sexual relations at one of the houses. One of the teachers, the general ed teacher, said that, she saw them together and they, should have not been together. But what had happened is the teacher that took roll that day did not go to find both of those kids. And then they come to find later that they had skipped out on class. So it was important that they know where those kids are. A reactive measure, I personally would question the teachers and just kind of question what went on. Whoops, sorry. just to make sure that they knew, that they know that they're okay, and they know that the kids are okay, and they know that, just to kind of get more information, basically. A proactive measure I would take would be that I would make sure that students there's a protocol in place for when students are absent. So if a student's gone from your class, you have to make sure you check as to why. Are they excused or are they unexcused? And if they're unexcused, you kind of need to dig a little deeper. And as a SPED teacher myself, I don't ever not find out where a student is, just because it's really important that they are safe and accounted for. Professional ethics, we need to make sure that there's enough staff to cover so we can find the students as necessary. The staff members professionally should have looked for those students, and especially knowing that they were both absent and that they both had a relationship. And to me, that was a little bit negligent on their part. I mean, I get that everyone is so busy, but it's important to know that all students are accounted for and all students are safe. The next one is Johnson Johnson versus School District of Millard. This is a first grade music class, and they were playing London Bridges, and I think we all have played that as a kid. But the teacher had said that they need to be gentle with each other, and then she went to the chalkboard and started writing on the board, and the students were playing by themselves. One student basically was swung back and forth too hard and had asked the students 3 or 4 times to stop swinging them so hard. Well, the students did not stop. The one student fell into the bookcase and had to get 50 stitches above his eye, and which could have been a lot worse. He could have lost an eye, but 50 stitches is quite a bit. The teacher was writing on the board and was not supervising the students really very well, and she should have been, and especially being first grade. A reactive measure would be that I would talk to the teacher about supervision and what that entails, and I would ask why they're playing a game that can get out of control without her watching better. A proactive measure would be that I would remind all staff about how and why we supervise students, and why it's important to watch students at all times, and especially in younger grades like first grade, or really any grade, but the younger grades, you would assume that they were less mature and could get hurt easier. Professional ethics, I would make sure that I assume that this was a one-time thing. I assume good intentions. You assume that people do what they're supposed to do, and just assume that this was a one-time accident and that it won't happen again. My last case is Drahen versus Harnett County Board of Education. And this one really was pretty upsetting to me. A high school football player died due to complications from heat stroke. I guess the argument was that the coach didn't allow for water breaks and didn't recognize the symptoms of a heat stroke. But after investigation, it wasn't proven that that's the case, so the case was actually dismissed. But a reactive measure, honestly, I would just make sure that all the coaches knew the signs of heat stroke and what to do in that case. And really that should be proactive as well. It's very upsetting when someone passes away, but you want to make sure it never ever happens again, or really any bad situation. A proactive measure would be that I would allow morning practices if the temperature was too high. I mean, especially in August where we live, it gets pretty hot, and you just want to make sure that students are as safe as possible. I would make sure that no one ever is denied water, and make sure that everyone, like I said, knows the symptoms of heat stroke. And then the professional ethics on my part would be that I need to assume good intentions from the coach. No one wants this situation to happen, and I would assume that the coach didn't, withhold water, and assume that they did a good job, and this is just an unfortunate accident. And just make sure that it never happens again, like I said. All right, and here are my sources, and I hope you guys have a great day, and thanks for watching.